Aryna Sabalenka has officially hit the eject button on the Qatar Open, and she isn't the only superstar packing her bags. It is absolute carnage out there, with elite contenders fleeing the brackets so fast the whole competition is crumbling before the first serve. The Australian Open runner-up has decided she would rather recharge her batteries than fight to protect her standing in Doha. Now, the organizers are in panic mode trying to salvage the lineup, so let's dive into this mass exodus and what it spells for the rest of the tour. But before we unpack all this chaos, hit up the comments section and give me your take. Is this a legitimate injury crisis, or are these athletes just ruthlessly prioritizing the majors over the regular tour stops? Okay, the headline news is Sabalenka scrubbing her name from the roster, which is a massive blow considering she dominated this very court back in 2020. But frankly, she is just the tip of the iceberg. This event is getting decimated by top-tier no-shows, forcing us to ask what exactly is happening in Doha to make everyone scatter. For Sabalenka, the official line is burnout. She needs a breather after that intense run down under. Fresh off that grueling championship clash with Aryna Sabalenka, she endured a physical and emotional ringer that clearly took its toll. Losing that trophy has got to burn. Absolutely. Yet it also highlights just how formidable she is. The woman is basically living in the finals these days, proving she is a permanent fixture at the top. She remains the ultimate target on tour, and pocketing over £1 million for the runner-up spot isn't exactly a bad consolation prize. However, the paycheck doesn't erase the need for some serious recovery time. So rather than dragging herself onto another court, she is recharging with eyes set on the Dubai Championships, which honestly seems like a smart play. Even machines need maintenance, especially after surviving the gauntlet of a Grand Slam deep run. Plus, if you look at the math, Sabalenka isn't risking a massive points drop by skipping Qatar this season. Sure, she hoisted the trophy in 2020, but her showings in the desert haven't exactly been spectacular since then. It is a calculated move. Why exhaust yourself in a grinder where you have little to lose when you could recover and strike harder at the tournaments that define your ranking? However, Sabalenka is merely one domino falling in a much larger chain reaction. The Qatar Open is bleeding talent. Iga Swiatek has inherited the top seed simply because the original favorite vanished. We have got world number 6 Jessica Pegula bailing out, and Naomi Osaka has scrapped her entire Middle Eastern itinerary. Madison Keys is gone. Barbora Krejcikova is out. And the casualty report is stacking up, with names like Marketa Vondrousova hitting the sidelines. Meanwhile, Leylah Fernandez hasn't even launched her campaign for the year yet. You have to look at the wreckage and wonder, who is actually left to play? They are literally plugging holes in the main bracket with athletes meant for the qualifying rounds. Alexandra Iala, Emiliana Arango, Daria Kazatkina, and Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova have all been promoted. Even Kristina Buxa got a golden ticket into the primary draw solely because the star power evaporated. This is not how a premier WTA spectacle is designed to function. You shouldn't be scrambling to patch up a depleted roster because half the seeds booked a flight home. We aren't talking about some minor 250-level regional meet here. This was billed as a crown jewel of the desert swing, and suddenly it is looking more like a showcase for the understudies. Switching gears to Sabalenka's headspace, her reaction following the Australian Open was shockingly raw and unfiltered. Sitting in that press room after the Rybakina defeat, she didn't bother with the usual rehearsed scripts. She confessed that while Rybakina was undeniably brilliant, she left everything on the court, even if it fell short. She acknowledged the missed windows of opportunity, shrugging it off with the brutal reality that in tennis, sometimes you are the hammer and sometimes you are the nail. Then she dropped a line that really stuck with me, saying she is praying she ends up holding the trophy more often than the runner-up plate this year. You rarely get that level of vulnerability. She is literally bargaining with the universe for a better win-loss ratio. That isn't the standard bulletproof arrogance we expect from the world's elite. That is the sound of a competitor who just had their heart ripped out on the biggest stage and is trying to glue the pieces back together. When the topic shifted to analyzing the match tapes, her answer was even more telling. She told her agent straight up that she couldn't face the footage yet, joking it might take a week or whenever the sting fades enough to move on. She described a chaotic mix of laughter and tears, calling it a hysterical meltdown that served absolutely zero tactical purpose. It was just pure, unadulterated emotional release. She was furious with herself for playing stellar tennis, only to crack under Rybakina's relentless aggression at the critical moment. But she managed to pivot back to a positive note, recognizing that despite the heartbreak, her performance in Australia was nothing short of magnificent. Rybakina was simply untouchable on the court today, a completely different class of player. It is that black and white. But here is the glimpse into the psychological torture chamber these titans endure. Sabalenka dropped a quote that freezes the blood. Time to have a chat with the team. She is talking about how her own crew is dodging her like a bullet because her energy is absolutely radioactive right now. That is brutal self-reflection. She knows her mind is a dark alley, and she is practically putting up caution tape so nobody gets hurt in the crossfire. You almost never see that kind of unfiltered truth in the polished world of professional tennis. Usually, we just get the robotic PR scripts about learning lessons and bouncing back stronger. Sabalenka is stripping away the varnish, admitting to hysteria, manic laughter, and being so intolerable that her staff is fleeing the room. That is the ugly reality. That is what happens when you crash and burn in a Grand Slam finale after surviving a fortnight of gladiatorial combat. Viewed through that lens, her decision to ghost the Qatar tournament is not just logical, it is survival. The woman is a wreck spirit, crushed, fuel tank completely dry. She needs a moment to exorcise the ghosts of Melbourne and recalibrate her psyche before she risks stepping into the arena again. Jumping into another firestorm 7 days later with that kind of baggage is suicide. But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't it awfully convenient that she pulls the ripcord on a tournament where she has 0 points to defend and a spotty track record? If this were the Sunshine Double Indian Wells or Miami with massive ranking implications, would she still be pleading insanity? Or would she miraculously find the grit to tape it up and get out there? Look, I am not calling her a liar. The burnout is real, and the mental fatigue in elite sports is heavy. But let's be real, modern players are playing 4D chess with their schedules. The calendar is a relentless meat grinder. You simply cannot survive at all. So they cherry-pick the glory events, the ones with the prestige and the payday, and treat the rest like optional homework. And the Qatar Open, it has clearly been marked as skippable by the heavy hitters this season. It is the perfect storm. The brutal hangover from the Australian Open, the exhausting flight to the Middle East, and the calendar slot, sitting right in the shadow of the massive Dubai event. No wonder the stars are bailing on Doha in droves. The irony is that Sabalenka owned this court in 2020, storming her debut and snatching the title in a blaze of glory. You would think that history creates a bond, but nostalgia clearly isn't enough to drag a shattered athlete off the couch when the emotional batteries are dead. Lifting a trophy 6 years ago doesn't sign you up for a lifetime sentence, especially when your body is screaming for a timeout. The organizers in Doha must be sweating bullets right now. They sold this event on the promise of a blockbuster lineup, and now their headliner is practically a default setting because everyone else fled. The bracket is now stuffed with names that would stump even the most dedicated trivia buffs. The dream matchups they advertised are dead in the water because the A-listers didn't bother to board the plane. For the fans, it is a massive letdown. You drop cash months in advance, hoping to see Sabalenka, Pegula, Osaka, the icons. Then the withdrawals roll in, and you are left watching a tournament that feels more like a glorified practice week than a premier competition. Honestly, you couldn't blame the crowd for storming the box office for refunds. But flip the script to the player's perspective, especially Sabalenka, who just survived an emotional apocalypse of a slam final loss. Skipping one event to protect your sanity is the only smart play. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Forcing a run in Doha while still mourning Melbourne would likely result in an early exit and a deeper depression. This entire mess shines a spotlight on the glaring structural flaw in the WTA schedule. We have way too many must-play events shoved into a window that is far too narrow. We ask these women to redline their bodies for 11 brutal months straight. The off-season is a joke, barely enough time to ice a knee, let alone reboot a brain. So players get ruthless, and tournaments like Qatar become collateral damage. Now, seeing Iga Swiatek slide into that top seed spot, she is the world number 2 and arguably the apex predator on tour right now, especially with Sabalenka and the elite squad missing in action. Swiatek's road to the gold just transformed from a rocky path into a freshly paved highway. She must be eyeing this decimated bracket and seeing nothing but free ranking points and a hefty direct deposit. Although winning by default, it leaves a bit of a hollow aftertaste, doesn't it? Lifting a trophy just because your rivals bowed out feels hollow compared to crushing them on the court and proving you are the undisputed queen of the jungle. You bank the ranking points and the hardware, sure, but there is a phantom asterisk haunting that win forever, everyone whispering, yeah, Swiatek took Qatar. But where were Sabalenka, Pegula, and Osaka? However, for the hungry up-and-comers suddenly catapulted into the main bracket, this mass exodus is like winning the lottery. Athletes like Alexandra Isla, Daria Kasatkina, and Kristina Buxa are staring down a golden ticket to play on a stage they might have struggled to reach through the grueling qualifiers. For a few of these grit-and-grind contenders, this bizarre twist of fate could be the spark that ignites a legendary career. Making a splash in a headline tournament, even a watered-down one, can skyrocket your world ranking, supercharge your self-belief, and completely rewrite your professional destiny. Amidst the wreckage of the draw sheet lies a hidden gem. While the tournament bleeds star power, the suspense factor goes through the roof. We might just witness a total nobody catch fire, tear through the bracket, and emerge as the exhilarating new face of women's tennis. It is the raw magic of competition. When the titans step aside, the underdogs finally get room to roar. As for Sabalenka, her strategy is crystal clear. Recharge the batteries now to unleash hell at the Dubai Championships later. Let's be real, Dubai is the heavyweight contender here, boasting massive prestige and a payday to match as a WTA 1000 event, dwarfing Qatar's 500 status. From a tactical standpoint, it is a no-brainer to bypass the smaller skirmish so you can arrive fresh and ferocious for the main war. She is not ghosting the Middle East tour. She is simply curating her battles and hoarding her stamina for where it counts. Expect the Dubai bracket to be absolutely loaded with killers because the appearance fees and purse are so fat that players will drag themselves onto the court even on zero sleep. Welcome to the brutal truth of the pro circuit. Cash is king and money screams louder than passion. Dangle a large enough check, and miraculously, every exhausted athlete suddenly discovers a reserve tank of adrenaline. If the money is mediocre, suddenly recovery becomes the priority, perfectly illustrating the massive disconnect between spectator desires and athlete survival. The crowd demands gladiators fighting to the death every single week, delivering blockbuster drama and peak performance without fail. The athletes, meanwhile, are trying to preserve their bodies, chase the legacy titles, and stack their bank accounts before their knees give out. Unfortunately, those two agendas are often on a violent collision course. Unless the WTA completely overhauls the schedule to respect human limits, this cycle of dropouts is never going to end. We will keep watching marquee events crumble into dust as stars withdraw, battered by physical injury and crushed by mental burnout. They need to space out the grind, slash the mandatory commitments, or pump up the prize pools so players have a financial reason to fight through the pain. Until that revolution happens, get used to witnessing disasters like Qatar, where a hyped-up spectacle withers into a ghostly shadow of its potential. Sabalenka bowing out is just the headline of the day. She is a symptom of a broken system, and she certainly won't be the last to walk away. As long as the circuit is built this way, pros are going to play the system, ruthlessly choosing when to show up and when to shut down. So that is the ugly truth. Aryna Sabalenka has ditched the Qatar Open, taking a massive chunk of the elite field with her. Now, the trophy is up for grabs in a chaotic Wild West shootout for anyone who actually bothered to board the plane. If you agree that this circus will continue until the WTA fixes their messy calendar, smash that like button and subscribe right now. Drop a comment below. Would you actually pay hard-earned cash for tickets, knowing half the headliners might bail at the very last second?